Let's go ahead and bring this guy in right now. One of my favorites in the biz, John Wilkerson, joins us. John, how are you, sir?
Doing well, Dave. How are you? Caleb, good to see you again.
Good to see you, John.
John knows more about baseball than anybody I've ever been around, and I'm sure he's very excited that the Diamond Vols are back at it. At what point, though, did it settle in, maybe in the offseason, that you just called a national championship team? I mean, it still doesn't sound completely right, given that you and I are both Knoxville natives. It still doesn't sound completely right, does it?
Yeah, it really has been so surreal. And it was funny, too, because first time I had the chance to talk to Coach after the championship celebration, it's like, I can tell you that in the last week, I've had 3 different dreams where there was one more game to win. And then I kept thinking to myself, in the context of that same dream, it's like, well, then why did they give us a parade? So it really was something. But yeah, I mean, just to see Tennessee be able to sit in the seat that it does, national champions, and now defending the crown, it's been remarkable because you go back to when he was introduced as Tennessee's head coach. He's had a vision for all of this, and it's been incredible to see how steady the climb was, how the ascension came the way it did, because everything was just a step forward, even with the unfortunate setback that was 2022. Right back at it after a kind of a heartbreaking start to the season. They were right there in the College World Series, and then last year, not just knocked on the door, but kicked the darn thing down.
Yeah, so John, let's talk about this season opening sweep of Hofstra over the weekend. I mean, it's Hofstra. I think they run-ruled all 3 games. But given the fact that I know it's a different team, but you're talking defending national champions who have an opening series in the cold of February and just absolutely obliterate them. How impressive is it to keep them that up and that excited to play for a series like that after being defending national champs?
Yeah, well, one of the things that stands out, you have the most turnover from one year to the next, going back to, it's identical to me to 2022, because you had so many guys move on to their start of their pro careers or just exhaust their eligibility. So you return Dean Curley in the starting lineup, Hunter Ensley in the starting lineup, and then your entire weekend rotation is brand new. So with all of the turnover, I think there was a point in time where this team, without question, celebrating what the program that they just joined accomplished. But now they want to carve their own path. And so they want to go win trophies of their own. For Tennessee last year to go win to rally and win the SEC East, the SEC regular season, and the SEC tournament championships. Those were great building blocks to set the stage for them to be the 1 seed and go do what no top seed has done since 1999. But I think this group, even though there are a number of guys still wearing orange and white that got to celebrate everything last year, it's a different role for them. So for them to go ahead, hit the ground running as they did, to see Liam Doyle get the ball for the first start for Tennessee and perform the way he did, Marcus Phillips, who earned the start having been primarily a reliever last year, watch him perform, and then see Nate Snead get that opportunity to be a weekend starter in the first weekend. Don't know that that's where he'll be this weekend or even moving forward. I just think it was really neat to see the way this team completely embraced the fact that this is the start of their time, as opposed to trying to duplicate what the 2024 team did.
Yeah, and it's to me a program that still, I go back to 2022, right? And they had the kind of wild group there a little bit. I think still that these players, and you're right, it's a different group every year, but I feel like they learned something from that. And there's a maturity there in that program that the LSUs of the world have had over the years, and those type of teams.
I agree, because even though there is still for many, whether it be members of the Southeastern Conference, fans of other SEC schools, or even media for that matter, they still look at Tennessee through those 2022 season eyes. So I think last year you saw a team, they were ready to scrape. If there was another team that bowed up against the Volunteers, then guys that were there for 2022 as freshmen like Christian Moore and Blake Burke, they're ready to go with the drop of a hat. But that wasn't what was at the forefront. They didn't have to be nasty. They didn't have to be villains. They just wanted to be the big orange, and that's what they did. But if there was somebody that, I mean, it's kind of like, if you don't want nothing, don't start nothing. That was kind of the approach. And so I do think that Drew Beam was also a part of that 2022 team. And so I think that you have seen not just the maturing of the head coach of the Volunteers, Tony Vitello, but I also think the mindset of Tennessee baseball players is much more grounded now than when they wanted to announce their presence with authority. But you're exactly right, Dave. I think you saw this team, especially the guys that were the building blocks of last year's title, they grew, and they grew as individuals, and they also grew in terms of how they wanted to represent Tennessee. And I mean, not anything at all against that incredible team that was so good in 2022. I mean, that's what they needed to do, to let folks know that Tennessee was here, that Tennessee was a part of the conversation, and they earned every bit of it. But I do think that you have seen what are the goals, the approach from one day to the next for essentially all Tennessee baseball players. That continues to be, look, today is the only day that we can focus on. This is the only day we can impact, because what you've done yesterday doesn't apply, and what may happen tomorrow, well, there's just no reason to worry about that.
I knew we'd have some questions for you. Already have one. David says, John, who's the biggest threat to usurp us as champions? That still doesn't sound right. LSU, Texas, or Texas A&M this baseball season?
Well, all are getting a good look. Texas, the word on the Longhorns is they can rake. And, of course, this is Schlossnagle leaves Texas A&M to go to Austin. That was a bit of a scandal there. But anyhow, I think it starts with Texas A&M. The team that you had to beat last year to win it, they're a consensus number one to start this year. They had everybody that entered the portal when Schloss left, and then everybody stayed when they made a very good hire. The coach had followed the A&M coach to Austin, and then when A&M didn't get the big positive responses they expected from the guys that they said, hey, do you want the job? They went back to who was such a popular coach among the players, that when he was hired as the Aggies coach for this year, everybody stayed. Nobody left. And then they added some really nice pieces through the portal. So, I mean, the thing to remember, A&M was the last number one team before Tennessee became number one last year. And, of course, it went to game 3 before the Vols won that College World Series. So I think the Aggies first and foremost. LSU, I think, is going to be strong because they're right there with it when you see the preseason rankings. Arkansas, if it finds a way to do something in the postseason, which we haven't seen them do, they're also expected to be incredibly talented. So I do think that A&M first and foremost. I do think Texas is going to be good. LSU and Arkansas are probably the other teams to watch first and foremost.
I'm completely ignorant to this situation, so I'm just going to tell you that up front. Explain the Alberto Osuna, the whole issue with him in the courts and what's going down there. Is this a lost year for him? What do you think?
Not yet. I do think the initial request for a waiver was denied. And so now it goes into, I think it's all about language, because he's in the exact same situation that we saw Diego Pavia, the Vanderbilt quarterback. He got a year from the NCAA to make up for the time that he spent in the junior college ranks. And it is the exact same scenario for Ozuna. But at the same time, it's a different wording. It was very specific. It was Pavia was using year 3 in terms of his NCAA eligibility in the season that he's now going to get another bonus year for. For Ozuna, he was using year 4. But that's only the difference because it was a fall sport in football versus a spring sport in baseball. So it comes down to literal language in what was granted by the NCAA to right now. I think the first baseman from North Carolina who played first at Walters State just up the road, I think he's got a really good argument, and I'll be surprised if it doesn't go his way. But at the same time, I've been disappointed by the NCAA before, and there is that chance. But I don't think there's any reason to think that he doesn't still have a very positive path to join this program right now.
I just had a flashback. I feel like I was in a preseason football practice where Philip Fulmer was kind of shaking the NCAA tree a little bit. Remember how he used to do when he go, well, if they could get their stuff done, maybe. And you kind of sounded a little bit like that. I like that. Go ahead, Caleb.
John, I want to ask you an overall question somewhat about Tennessee as a program and then, knocking down the door last year to win the World Series. Tell me if this is an apt comparison, just from a baseball history perspective. I think of the late 40s, early 50s Brooklyn Dodgers that kept knocking on the door, just couldn't get past the Yankees. And I think that 53 Dodgers had by far the best record in baseball, and that was the best record they had ever had. Lose to the Yankees again, like the 2022 Vols. 2 years later, with Jackie Robinson, they knocked down the door, finally win the World Series in 55. And then that spurs like 4 more World Series titles, I think, over the next 10 years for the Dodgers. Do you think Tennessee's in that mold where, because they kept going to the College World Series, they had the best team they had ever had in 2022 and get bounced out, but then they finally knocked down the door in 2024. Do you think the psychological aspect of knocking down the door can make this team almost be dynastic over the next decade?
There's certainly that potential, because I think it starts first with the staff. Because what was most impressive to me, you come out of 2022 where you didn't make it to Omaha, and then they're everybody's number 2 team because you return all of your starting pitching. You expect the lineup to be good, even though you lost as much as you did from those hitters 1 to 9. And then it was just a stumble out of the gate. You're 5-10 after the first half of the SEC schedule, and then having looked at what had worked, what the approach was by the staff to say, here's what gives us our best chance to win, Tennessee goes from being 5-10 to going 11-4 the rest of the way. It was the second best turnaround ever by a team that went 5-10 to finish the league. So for them to do that, shake that off, and get to Omaha for the second time at that point in 3 years, I think that tells you you've got a staff that if it doesn't go right, they're not going to do any. I mean, they're going to burn both ends of the candle, whatever it takes, just to find the way to best compete. Now, recent history will tell you, after Mississippi State won it, they dropped off the table. After Ole Miss won it, they disappeared. LSU had struggles last year in defending their crown. LSU had the best follow-up season compared to the previous 2, but they still fell far short of how dominant and how good they were. Granted, you lose Paul Skeens, and those are huge shoes to fill. But anyhow, LSU was in a better position because they played their best ball at the end of the season. So history will tell you, recent history, that it could be an uphill climb for Tennessee. But I really like what the Vols have to go out there and try and compete, if not win another one. And if it doesn't click originally or right out of the chute, then I do think it's a staff that's not going to be outworked and trying to find the combination that does. So, yes, I think Tennessee is rightly in that conversation to get back to Omaha. And without a doubt, they have the personnel to go win it. They are a younger team this year than they were last year when you look at who are going to be the key reserves, things along those lines. But I do think that they are, Caleb, right where they need to be, just in terms of what you look at on paper as to building blocks and everything it takes to win.
A couple more questions from the message board, but raise your hand if you thought that Caleb Calhoun made up a word. Didn't. Dynastic is a word. I thought he was trying to say dynamic or something else.
No, I was trying to say dynastic.
You did a great job, but it relates to hereditary rulers of a country and a succession of rulers. That's a very good word, Caleb. I'm not selling you short at all. That's a great word.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sounds like such a backhanded compliment. Can you take that down? I can't get it down. We got a couple of questions I want to get to. I know John's got to get out of here, but will Tennessee's JUCO arms get more run than the freshman pitchers? What do you say?
I think so. I think when all is said and done, I think there are going to be plenty of opportunities. And I have seen in the comments section, rightly so, that Tennessee is already minus 6 innings in terms of after the first week against Hofstra. That's the boomerang from the run rule, is you miss out on those chances for either plate appearances and or innings on the mound. But I think it's going to come down to who looks best ready to compete. And so I do believe those guys that already have a little bit of experience are going to be further down the road than the freshmen. So yes, and then you add Tegan Coons. He was actually a freshman that was thought to possibly be in the mix to start this past weekend, but he had been a little bit under the weather. And as Coach joined us on Monday on Sports Talk, he said he wants to see him go through a couple of bullpens before he puts him out there. So not to say that there can't be freshmen who move in front of some junior college pitchers in terms of what Tennessee has this year, but I think the guys that are stronger, that have a little bit of seasoning under their belt, are ready to go. My guess is they'll probably get the early opportunities, but I also think as long as Frank Anderson gives them the thumbs up, anybody has the chance to get out there.
Last thing, John, we'll let you go, and you can listen to John 6 to 9 Eastern on the Sports Animal. He is unbelievably fantastic. David says, does Inslee take the star captain role over from Christian Moore this season?
I think there's the potential for that, without a doubt. That's the reason that Hunter came back. I mean, to do what he did, to make that catch against Carolina, the slide would prove to be the winning run to give you a national championship. I mean, it's legendary. He could have literally ridden off into the sunset. But as he said himself, and if you haven't seen the documentary Hunter, check it out on the Tennessee Athletics app. It should be the YouTube channel for Tennessee Athletics. Such a fantastic, it's about a 45-minute deal on Hunter and last year's team, but it's so remarkably done. But as he himself said, he thinks that he has a greater impact on this year's Tennessee team than he could have had in terms of enjoyment and possibly being somewhere else playing for anyone else. So why not go ahead, enjoy another year, your last year in the orange and white, see what you can do, and just kind of letting the newcomers know, whether it's from the portal or from the high school ranks, that this is the expectation at Tennessee. This is where the bar is set in Knoxville. So yes, I think he is in a prime leadership position. I don't know that anybody can do production-wise what Christian Moore did, but Hunter Ensley has been a leader for a while and will continue to be one of the best for the Big Orange in that regard.
You're one of the best, John. We appreciate it. I love visiting with you. Let's do lunch sometime soon.
Absolutely, Dave. Caleb, sure to appreciate it. Hope you guys have a great day.